I would like to now start session number 3, which is also the last session of the day. And this, as you already know, is on the topic of cryptocurrency, and more specifically on the governance and regulation aspect of cryptocurrency. So, may I invite the moderator of the session, Mr. Almir Kolan. He is the director at AAOIFI Australia and has actually done a lot of extensive research in the area. May I also request Dr. Muhammad Burhan Arbuna to join us on the stage. He is the head of Sharia compliance at As-Salam Bank. Can I also ask Mr. Ashraf Juma Ali, regional head Sharia and governance of CIMB Islamic Bank. I would also like to invite Mr. Khalid Saad. He is the CEO at Bahrain Fintech Bay, and I'm sure he has a lot of interesting points to share with us on the topic. So Mr. Almir, this is your session, however you want to take it. If you want to open the floor, it's your call. Okay?
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is session number 3. I think, inshallah, next year, for the lunch, we only serve salad and watermelon. So, let me feel more energized. Then the real lunch after this. So, I think this topic is very interesting, cryptocurrency, although I just realized it's been 10 years since Bitcoin and blockchain started. So it's already a decade, and interestingly, it's also a decade since the first bank collapse, since the global financial crisis, which tells you something about the response to the banks and the financial systems that we have. In reality, much of it comes from the anger that people have about the in the system and how it operates. In fact, if you read Satoshi's paper, where he put the foundation of the Bitcoin and crypto, he talked about that the whole idea is because the banks and financial system cannot be trusted. And the idea is that they wanted to outsource the trust where it is in the public domain, which is, as an idea, a very noble idea. And for most of you, it is not strange to know that Islam, with its maqasids or aims, is trying to protect the wealth. One of the things is protection of the wealth. And when it comes to economy, the way we protect economy is through integrity of the financial system, and especially the payment system. We preserve the trust. So today we have a number of leaders in this field, in Islamic finance, and many others areas. They have presentations where they will share some of the ideas regarding regulation. How do we regulate this industry? Because technology has a lot of opportunity, but it also opens the door to misuse. So what are the points we should consider and we should understand in order to benefit from the technology and at the same time prevent potential harm? So as our first speaker, I would like Dr. Arbuna to share with us his presentation and points to conduct. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. And I have to present my presentation in English. My first disclaimer is that here we are not talking, I'm not going to talk about fintech issues or blockchain. That is something else. The next issue is usually the question that we receive is whether cryptocurrency is halal or haram. And I said, this is not the question. The question is whether cryptocurrency is a currency or not a currency. If we establish that it's a currency, all the rules of currency will apply to it. If we establish that it's not a currency, then you have to find something else. So the issue is not whether it's halal or haram. In this aspect, my presentation is saying that during these days we have realized that this issue of cryptocurrency have taken scholars at once. Maybe they didn't prepare for it. And then it came out. In any emerging issues and innovation, we found out that the Sharia scholars or the scholars have principles. The scholars are far ahead of innovation. In most of the literature of fiqh, if you look at them, they talk about issues that did not happen yet. And the issues that happen, it comes under the issue of fiqh al-nawazil. Once we come to the fiqh al-nawazil, in this aspect, the scholars have certain approaches, which I can say very straightforward. Ibn Farhoun, a Maliki scholar, stated it clearly and very briefly what the approach of scholars should be when it comes to new issues. So Ibn Farhoun was saying, a slackness and laxity in issuing fatwa is not acceptable. A person who is known by this should not be consulted. The slackness, mana tasahul, means this is the definition of tasahul when it comes. Sometimes when we are defining tasahul, we think that it's some kind of leniency. But Ibn Farhoun is saying slackness or laxity in issuing fatwa means lack of vigilance and carefulness that may lead to issuing a fatwa without thoughtful thinking and analysis. He who adopts this approach may do so due to his intuition that quick issuance of fatwa is smartness, and delay, vigilance, and cautiousness, in his view, is a sign of incompetence and weakness. A delay and vigilance that protect against wrong decisions is better than a quick fatwa that leads to astray or off the track. He said, in some cases, the laxity approach is in issuing fatwa may be caused or directed by bad intention, which is exemplified in issuing lenient fatwas to benefit certain groups or issuing extreme fatwas to harm others. So Ibn Farhoun gave us two approaches when it comes to new issues. Some might automatically go and say, okay, this is acceptable, and some might say, no, we have to think and see the issues. From these angles, I'm saying, when it comes to cryptocurrency, there are so many issues that are not researched, which we have to look into. The things that I can remember are, for example, ruling of processes of mining and related issues. This is a research area. Creation of smart contracts, which deprived parties from recommendation of Islamic law to have the right to overturn a contract prior to its conclusion, which is known as iqala. The issues related to treatment of digital agreement when one of the parties to the smart contract passes away. How do we deal with that? When the contract will come automatically. The indecisiveness nature of contracts where parties may not know which of the subject matter agreed upon will be purchased by them, since the sale and purchase is programmed. It will happen automatically. Purchasing of goods and services with a currency of unknown identity. Contracting on something to be owned in the future. So these are some of the issues that I have seen when I was issuing this. Then I come to the issue of jurisprudential characteristics of currencies and medium of exchange. When you come to a currency, the scholars have two main views. One view is that a currency is gold and silver. Finish. The other view is saying currency should be look at from the practical perspective, practice. Whatever people regard as currency is a currency. So we look at it from that perspective, and this is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah and others. However, this approach, I think this second approach is the view of Umar ibn Khattab when he had wanted to create currency from camel skins. However, he refrained from doing so for another superweight economic aspect when he was told that such an ambition will lead to another economic and environmental impact, which is the extinction of the camels. This is also obvious due to the fact camels were mainly the transportation means, including other services. Hence, their extinction will have huge impact on society, including hitting the state treasury pool due to the need to purchase them for the purpose mentioned from other countries. The objective of Umar ibn Khattab was to get a stable currency, and the skin of camels was a respected article to do so. But he refrained from doing that from a regulatory perspective, from another perspective, because people said, if you do that, you are going to suffer. But still, I have analyzed also, I didn't go for the interpretation of practice. What the scholars mean by practice. I have explained in the paper that what they mean by practice is to issue a currency from something that is physical, not something that is not known, that cannot be seen. If you issue a currency from paper, or issue a currency from plastic, or issue a currency from steel, or issue a currency from sand, something that can be seen. This is what the scholars are saying practices. And then I come to the main issue of in order for a currency to gain the status of a currency, it has to have certain characteristics. One of them is that its creation, anything related to currency creation is the prerogative of the state, due to the fact that state is the custodian and manager of issues of public interest. Cryptocurrency is issued by the state, is supported by the state. If it is not, then it failed this criteria. The second criteria is that lack of quality to acquire another currency using cryptocurrency. If I have cryptocurrency, I can buy goods. But if I have dollars, I cannot buy cryptocurrency. I cannot use my dollars to buy cryptocurrency. I have to go and mine. So here again, a currency should have the ability to acquire another currency, which is not there in the cryptocurrency. Third thing that I have come across, it is non-accessibility by all groups of society. In order for a currency to be a currency, it has to be something that all groups of society can have access to. In cryptocurrency, the people who have access to cryptocurrency are those who are knowledgeable, very elite people. They can have access to big computers. They have the money to buy a computer in order to go and mine. This is not available for all people. So here again, cryptocurrency failed the test of a currency. And then we come to the issue of the stability, which I have already talked about, that the idea of the state to be able to create a currency is to get stability in the currency, because instability will end up making people poor. The objective of a currency is to get people, they can predict at least relatively about their future obligations, how much they will pay. But if their future obligation is going to be heated with the currency, then this currency fails. Among the traits of a currency is that the primary ingredient of a currency is quality and shield against forgery. And you have to be able to see that this currency is something that it cannot be disfigured, because the scholars talk about disfigured, and they say if you disfigure a currency, this is a punishable act. So I cannot see a currency that I can disfigure. When I cannot disfigure it, that means I cannot determine whether it's subject to forgery or not. In that case, it fails the principle of applying a currency. So at the end of the day, in my conclusion, I end up saying that, okay, if it is not a currency, it is what? So I said, okay, this is some kind of, you can say it's an asset of intellectual behavior of people who have put together a mathematically coded issues into some kind of an asset, and they put it into a container, digital container, and that digital container of his thinking, he makes his money and the people are trading in it. If you use that digital mathematically coded asset and buy an asset, then we create the issue of barter trading. We create the issue of sale. If you use it to buy currency, you exchange an asset with a currency. It's a sale. If you use it to buy goods, then you create some kind of barter trading. So you exchange good with a good, is a barter trading. You exchange good with a currency, is a sale contract. So this is briefly what my paper is all about. Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Arbuna. That was very interesting presentation. I think some of those points, especially regarding that struck me when I read it, was that state being custodian of the basically welfare of people is, I think, something very relevant, something really to think about. Next speaker will be Sheikh Ashraf Goma Ali. He will go a little bit more deeper into the issues and uncover maybe some of the specific points that should help us in analyzing the crypto world. Can we get a presentation up? And I think somebody, if you are going to control it, somebody might control, they're going to give you the clicker.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I'm very honored to be here before you. I really don't think that I'm qualified to stand here, but I want to thank AAOIFI for having this husn al-dhan, inshallah, and I hope that we can give something that will be beneficial. And the other request that I have from everyone is that we would really like your participation. It's not a one-way thing where we are teaching you. If that was the case, we would have some of the people in the front row up here. But we want, inshallah, ask questions, challenge. We want it to be a discussion where we can all benefit together. So with that, so what are cryptocurrencies? I really didn't want to get into this too much, the introduction, because I'm sure all of us or most of us have already been through programs on that. But this is the definition of the FATF, Financial Action Task Force. These are the people who make the rules for anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing and that kind of stuff. So they use the term virtual currency. So they say it's a digital representation of value that has three things. One, it can be digitally traded and functions as a medium of exchange and a unit of account and a store of value. So that's basically the definition of money or currency. Then they say it does not have legal tender status in any jurisdiction and is not issued by a government. That's the second part, the fact that it's decentralized. And then the last one is that it fulfills the above function only by agreement within the community of users of the virtual currency. So it's a currency where people agree that we are going to take this as a customary currency and it's not going to be issued by the government. So that's basically a working definition of cryptocurrency or virtual currency. The other thing that we have to know is smart contracts. And it's kind of small, sorry about that. But smart contracts are a very important part of the ecosystem and the infrastructure of digital and crypto. And smart contracts started with something called Ethereum. And Ethereum is a platform that allows you not only to have a coin where you can exchange value. I have one coin, you have one coin. I transfer from my wallet to your wallet in a way that, it's يستحيل العادة تواطؤهم على الكذب for our Sharia scholars. It's not like that, but it is, you can actually have a transaction. So if you can, for example, have an escrow. If I transfer something and then this happens, then release the funds to that person. If this happens, then that happens. Okay? You can have a murabaha, right? If the customer buys the goods for the bank, then execute the murabaha transaction, right? If he does not complete the murabaha transaction, sell it in the market and take the difference from the hamish jidiyya, take the actual damages. You can have those, you can program those things, if then statements, and have automatically the program will execute that thing. So that's smart contracts, and there are a lot of use cases or a lot of ways it can be implemented. So now, what are the types of cryptocurrency? So there's one which is what we think of when we think of cryptocurrency, which is Bitcoin, where it's something that allows transfer of value from peer to peer. And then there's something else which is, if it's not that, then it's called a token. And a token, there are a lot of different kinds of tokens. And a token is the result of a smart contract. And so we're going to see in the next slide the different types of tokens that are out there. Sharia scholars, mainly in my research, I found that they mainly focused on Bitcoin, not so much on the tokens. Some scholars have written about tokens in a very robust way, but that's really a minority. So these are the different types of tokens. You have utility tokens, and these are really the majority of them now, utility tokens. So you have the right to a particular service. Someone will create a file sharing or a system where we can all share our computers together. And then they'll say, if you want to use this system, you just buy this token and it will give you 5 minutes. A right to use 5 minutes on this system. That's a utility token, right? There's something called a work token, sometimes called a governance token. So, for example, we have this system, but who is going to decide the rules? Who is going to decide certain changes? You can buy token to have the right to vote or the right to make changes, for example. There's asset tokens, where it's a claim on assets. So some people are establishing a REIT based on tokens. So they'll buy a building, and instead of having shares, it'll issue tokens. So you issue these tokens, and this token represent your claim on the ownership of this building. You have equity tokens, which are very much like stocks, like shares. You can have dividends and things like that. There's buyback tokens, where someone will, they have a company they're starting, and they say, invest, buy these tokens, and then I promise to buy back. Once I have money, I promise to buy back. Or I give a non-binding promise to buy back. That's called buyback token. So you have the right for them to buy it back. And then there's revenue tokens, where you can get a share in the revenue. So all of these, there's so many, there's like 3,000 kinds of tokens. Anybody can create a token. And as far as Sharia, the scholars that have spoken about this, they generally say it depends on the business that this represents. It depends on if it's halal, if it's haram, and we will apply those rules. Similar to how we would analyze a sukuk, for example. So that's tokens now. Now let's go to cryptocurrency, because that's really what a lot of the scholarly research is about. As far as cryptocurrency, what I found in my research, that there are 3 positions. Some scholars completely prohibit, some scholars completely permit, and others permit for transactional use and prohibit for speculation. So we're going to look at each one and see which one we agree with. I had a poll that I wanted to display, but we weren't able to display it, to see what your views were. So this is kind of a summary of the views. So there are a couple of issues. Currency must be government issued and guaranteed. So our brother Sheikh Arbuna mentioned that. So the people who prohibit, they say yes, definitely, must be. People who permit, they say no, not necessarily. People who say 50-50, they say no. The ones who allow for transaction, not for speculation. And we're going to go in detail in each one. The other issue is illegal activities. Cryptocurrency can be used in illegal activities. So for the people who prohibit, that's material to their ruling. They cite that as one of the reasons why they say it's not allowed. But for the others, they say it's not material to the ruling on whether cryptocurrency is allowed or not. The other one is, does it meet the basic conditions for a currency? And aside from that, it has to be issued by the government. Means of exchange, a unit of account, store of value, can it be used for debts? So the people who prohibit, they say no, it cannot. It does not meet those criteria. The people who permit, they say yes, it does. The primary use, the people who prohibit say this is primarily for speculation. We don't really see much of a use for it besides that. The people who permit, they say actually there are commercial activities as well, in addition to speculative activities. And here, the position on speculative activities between the second and the third they see that's more significant, so they have to look at the intention of the person. Finally, overall, is it إِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا? Is the harm more than the good, or is the good more than the harm? So the people who prohibit, they look from a maqasidi perspective, they look at the maqasid, and they say actually the harm is more than the good, so they say that it's overall harmful. And the ones who permit, they say no, it's not overall harmful. And the ones who give the third position, they say it depends on the use. So now let's unpack each one of these in a bit of detail. So first, the role of the government. So Dr. Arbuna mentioned about the role of the government. And here, classic fiqh is very clear that the role of the state is to protect the currency and to issue the currency. And of course, back then, currency was gold and silver. And one of the big things that they spoke about was people breaking the coins, debasing the coins, putting base metals in the coins. And people were punished for that. Even to the extent some scholars considered it fasad fil ard, and it's possible even to cut off the person's hand, right? So one of the rationales, one of the arguments that Ibn al-Qayyim uses against non-precious metal currency, or flus, which was not gold and silver, he said when people used flus, copper coins, non-precious coins, the prices were unstable. So he said this is why it's bad to do that, right? So today, there is this misunderstanding or misconception, this word guarantee, as if we're talking about the guarantee in the past, which is that the sultan will make sure that the gold coin is, if it says 1 ounce of gold, it's actually 1 ounce of gold. But that's not the case anymore, right? The government doesn't guarantee the value of the coin, of the currency, vis-a-vis how much it can buy. The government, the central bank's role is they have 2 roles typically. So since I'm American, I'm looking at, my central bank. So one is trying to get full employment, and the other is trying to keep inflation manageable. And those are 2 opposite type of goals. And so they're saying we're okay with some inflation. We realize to have growth, we need to have some inflation, so we're okay with that. So they're not keeping it stable in the sense that it will always be the same. But they're saying it's okay if it loses a little bit of value, 3%, 4% every year. In other countries, maybe 5%, 6%, 8%. That they're okay with that. Is that what our scholars were talking about in the past? Would Ibn al-Qayyim be okay with debasing the currency 8%, 9% a year? Would he be okay with that? So I don't know, it's a question to ask. Permissive scholars say that it's not a condition for the government to control, but this is a means to an end. This is not something in the Quran, it's a means to an end. And the issue is justice. And scholars all agree that if a government says cryptocurrency is illegal, then Sharia-wise, you're not allowed to use it because you have to obey the leader. And the leader has the authority to even limit something that's halal if there is a maslaha or benefit in that. So that's the role of the government. Now, what about use in illegal activities? That's another one that people tend to focus on a lot. And scholars who prohibit, they say this is material. These are used a lot in illegal activities. Um, and of course, that's in the news a lot. Now, that is being, the others say this is already addressed in regulation. So I'm going to talk about that in the regulatory section, but the FATF, which basically gives recommendations for all governments on how to manage anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. So they did a study. They released 2 papers on virtual currencies and also a risk-based approach. Their approach, they said, look, take a risk-based approach. The risk-based approach, very simply, is you look at where people convert the crypto into fiat, and which is basically exchanges, and you regulate those, and you apply the AML regulations to those. And that will basically deal with your issue. So that's kind of the approach that they have taken. But I've noticed in the research that the Sharia scholars are more afraid of AML than the people who set the AML rules. So, is it a currency? Which is, does it meet the basic criteria of a currency? And what I found, those who prohibit, their main issue is on the volatility. They say, how can this be a unit of account when it's so volatile? How, something will have a certain price today and then tomorrow will have another price. How can I have a debt? How can I have a long-term debt obligation in crypto and it's so volatile? So the scholars who allow, they said that that's a non-issue. If there are fiat currencies that are also very volatile. Look at Venezuela. Their currency is more volatile than Bitcoin. Is Venezuela's currency no longer a currency? Look at many other countries. So this is an issue. This is something new, and it's still stabilizing. But does that mean that it becomes haram? So that's kind of another issue. Now, what about the primary use? So the scholars who say that it's prohibited, they say this is primarily speculation, and it doesn't really have any real value. The others have a different view. And what's interesting is that, this is a new technology. And there was some research that I want to share on how new technologies work vis-a-vis the financial markets. So there's this, and sorry, the writing is a bit small. There's a researcher, her name is, her last name is Perez, and she researched 250 years of technological advances. And I need to come over here so I can see. But basically, 5 different areas. One was the Industrial Revolution. She looked at the steam engine. She looked at electricity. She looked at heavy manufacturing. And then she looked at technology, the tech bubble. And she found that basically there is this constant trend. So what happens? In the beginning, and there's FK, financial capital, and PK, productive capital. In the beginning, things move kind of slowly together. The financial capital and the productive capital are together. And then there's a bit of a frenzy. This is where you can call it a type of bubble, where the financial capital is trying to find which ones are going to be the winners. And so there's so many things coming. And that typically happens, and they call it the installation phase. So for railroads, when they were installing all of the tracks, they didn't know which railroad company was going to be the big winner. In the .com, when they were installing all of the internet, when the new companies were coming, they didn't know which technology was going to be the winner. So you find this bubble, right? But that's something that happened not just in technology, but it happened in all of these technological revolutions. And then what happens? Typically, the bubble bursts, and the bad players, the weak players, get washed out of the market, and then things come back to normal, and the financial capital and the productive capital are in sync. So the money will start going to the stronger companies. That's how technological revolutions happen. So if we say this is speculative, it's a bubble, and I hear that a lot, we also need to realize, and what she said here, that when we understand this, she said that it's more likely, people will be more likely to be able to perceive the goals with viable and realistic proposals. Help you to be more realistic when you're looking at regulating, when you're looking at understanding these things. So overall, is it overall harmful or beneficial? So of course, the people who prohibit, they say overall harmful. The people who permit, they say no, it's okay, overall beneficial. So here, like I mentioned, there's different perspectives. But the ones who say that it's allowed, they say whatever harms two things. They're not intrinsic to cryptocurrency. It's not a harm that's built in. Like there's no, like alcohol in the cryptocurrency. It's not najis or something. But that can be handled and managed through regulation. Okay. Now, as far as what is the potential role of cryptocurrency in Islamic finance, three things that I'm thinking about, and of course I really would love to hear from all of you. Efficiency gains, because smart contracts allow you to automate transactions through smart contracts. So if then, so you want to do tawarruq, you want to make it so you don't have to have Sharia audit anymore. You can make it so, Sheikh Gadi was talking about Sharia audit, right? And the importance of it. You can make it so it's impossible to make a mistake with smart contracts. Also, new commercial products. So certain things, the costs are really high. So for example, to do a sukuk issuance, the cost is very high. So in Malaysia, at least has to be 250 million ringgit for us to do a sukuk. But you can do an ICO with all of the rules in place, something called smart sukuk. You can do a crowdfunding, and you can bring down those costs while having strong levels of compliance. So you can have new products that are more democratic. And then new social products, because crypto allows you to have this traceability throughout the whole Senate, right? You can have that traceability there. So therefore, you can start, when people have, and also Dr. Gedi was mentioning about waqf and zakah, and we need to innovate there. So if we can add more transparency, so we can start creating new products. Now, will Islamic finance influence the development of cryptocurrencies? Is it relevant? So this is one of the questions that I was asked to talk about. And I'm just going to go out on a limb here, since I'm amongst friends. So historically, Islamic economists said we should have profit and loss sharing. And I heard that also mentioned here in the conference. But yet we don't really find that profit and loss sharing model that was imagined actually in practice. We find a debt-based system. And I would say, and actually my colleagues in Malaysia, some of my colleagues in Malaysia say that the reason for that is the fractional reserve system. The fractional reserve system makes Islamic banks function with one hand tied behind their back, or maybe both hands behind their back. Why? Because customer can give a loan to the bank, a loan, but it's called a deposit, as if that money is still there, even though that money is no longer there. And then the customer doesn't care about the bank or the risk because the government is guaranteeing, right? And then government also allows tax deductibility for interest, which encourages debt, right? That's not there for equity. Therefore, banks are able to borrow from customers at very low rates. And the government mandates paying taxes in fiat currency, and maybe even through the banks. So there's all of this special treatment for banks, and special treatment for debt especially. And why? Some would say because banks allow governments to borrow when they are in need. A lot of the historical banking started because of wars, and so governments needed to borrow, and so banks were there, so banks could lend to the government and things like that. Also, it allows government to control the money supply through the control of banks and interest rates. Thing is that crypto is different. So crypto, actually, there would not be a such thing as a crypto bank, because for crypto, either you have it or not. It's like gold, right? I transfer money to you. It's out of my wallet, it's in your wallet, and it's done. So if there was a bank and I deposit that in the bank and the bank lent that money out to someone else, I would not have the crypto in my wallet anymore. So it would be more like what we imagined in Islamic economics, that the bank either is a wakil, a wadi, to hold my money on a wadi'a basis, and the money is there and the bank does not touch it, or he is a mudarib and he invests the money and he tells me the money is not there anymore, it's invested. So that model could be something that they can learn from us, or we can learn from them and rediscover our roots. As far as regulatory threats and opportunities relating to crypto, and I think I'm running out of time, I'll try to wrap up in like, how much? 1 minute, 2 minutes? This is my friend here, so he'll hook me up. So, okay, barakallahu feek. So regulatory threats and opportunities relating to crypto, 3 areas: monetary policy, AML, and consumer protections. So as far as AML, I mentioned FATF, what they're doing. They recommended that banks and countries focus on the exchanges. Some countries have done different things, but mainly what I've seen is the focus is on regulating the exchange. I actually wanted to invest in ICO. So I needed to buy crypto. I was in Malaysia. In order to buy crypto, I had to go to an exchange. In order to do that, I had to scan my passport, and then I had to take a picture of my passport and a piece of paper and my face, and they did EKYC. It was a very interesting experience, but that's what they do. All exchanges do that. So the second thing, as far as consumer protections, many regulators and central banks are issuing warnings to the public: be careful of crypto, be careful of the investments, they're very risky. And then the other thing is some jurisdictions have prohibited certain elements. There is a misconception that there are a lot of governments that have completely banned crypto, which is actually not true. And I found that even some scholars are writing that in their papers, which is not true. There are certain prohibitions on some things. Many of their prohibitions relate to ICOs and not to just regular crypto. On the monetary policy side, so the IMF has a paper on this, and they're saying that crypto has there are certain things that crypto will never be able to do. It will never be a lender of last resort. It will never be able to absorb shocks by doing things like quantitative easing and printing money to help businesses flourish when business cycle goes down. So they said that's one thing. But they said that there is a threat, which is that if crypto becomes very prevalent, how will we transmit monetary policy? How will the central banks expand or contract the economy? By printing money and doing those types of things. So how to respond? They said three things they recommend. One, make fiat currencies better and more stable units of account. So your monetary policy, make sure that you do a very good job. Second, regulate the use of crypto to prevent regulatory arbitrage and unfair advantage from lighter regulation. So it shouldn't be that crypto gives you a better price in the remittance because crypto skimps on the AML, right? It shouldn't be that. So you need to fix that. Third, continue to make central bank money attractive, possibly by issuing central bank digital tokens. Think about that. So that's what they're saying. Now I want to tell you what the Federal Reserve is talking about digital tokens. So two economists who've written a lot in the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, they spoke about should central banks be issuing central bank cryptocurrency. So they basically they did a study, and they found that cash is important. So they looked at the Swiss franc, and they found that when technology went up, cash started going down. But then even when technology kept going up, people kept holding the cash. And then in the financial crisis, people started holding more cash. So they learned that people actually want to have cash. And there are benefits to that. Cash is decentralized, right? Yes, only the government can make cash, and it's also physical. And the benefit so they looked at that, and then they looked at the other forms of money. So commodity money like gold, central bank electronic money, which is basically the bank's accounts with the central bank. And then commercial bank accounts. Those are all different types of money. And then Bitcoin. And they found overall that the benefits, that there is actually a significant benefit to have a central bank cryptocurrency that's decentralized but controlled by the central bank. And one of the big reasons is that it can serve as an alternative to cash. It can be something that's resilient, that I don't have to be facing. I don't have to face the credit risk of the bank. So if you have a bank account and you have money in the bank account, you are facing the credit risk of the bank. That bank account is supposed to represent money, federal, actual bank notes. But if the bank is not able to provide it, then you are not going to get your money. So this one, you'll have a direct relationship with the central bank. The central bank will actually issue this cryptocurrency. You can make payments directly, and they're saying that you can leverage on the existing infrastructure of banks, where every person who has a regular bank account will have a central bank account, and where you keep your digital cash. And this will also make banks more competitive, because that may also pay interest, in a conventional setting, may pay interest, and so with zero credit risk, while with the bank you're facing some credit risk, and so the banks will have to be more competitive. So that was an idea that they gave, and I think a lot of central banks are starting to look at that. As far as standardization in cryptocurrency, 4 things, since we're AAOIFI and standardization. So Sharia best practices for currency protocols. So our Sheikh, Dr. Arbuna, mentioned about the Sharia rules for currencies. So those can be built in. If we have standards, we need to start translating our Sharia standards into a language that computers can understand. So having a Sharia best practice for a currency protocol that we believe is Sharia compliant. Also best practices for ICOs, initial coin offerings, based on disclosures, open source code. There is now a set of best practices developing. Also, smart contract friendly Sharia standards from Murabaha. I want to do Murabaha using smart contract. Is it dual wakala? Is it bay' mu'allaq? What is it? How do we interpret that for the computer? And then Sharia screening for ICOs. These ICOs are happening. How do we do the Sharia screening for those? And that's it. If you want to send me some Bitcoin, you can send me. This is like LinkedIn, so you can connect and continue the discussion. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you very much. That was a very useful and in-depth discussion. I think it clearly highlights some of the benefits that we can have from technology, opens many doors. Now I would like to ask our brother Khalid Saad, who is CEO of Bahrain FinTech Bay, to maybe just tell me a little bit about what he heard here, because there is a way we think about it in terms of taking care of the welfare of the people, whether it's a state or whatever. Then we have these opportunities. But where are we today? You know, like, for example, if we look at what is happening with this Bitcoin. So, for example, reality is that not everything, even in these amongst these players, is agreed upon. There are a lot of breakaway coins. Even the Bitcoins, I think he says it's been broken 80 times now. It has 80 forks. It branched to 80 Bitcoins, different kinds. It's difficult to keep this consensus. So how do you see this between what's happening on reality and the need to continue innovation? How do you see this discussion and Sharia compliancy debate with the movement of technology and the times? Can we get another mic?
Thank you very much. I think you know, if the topic has gained more prominence over the last year, especially with the spectacular rise of, I think, Bitcoin, and then the spectacular probably demise or fall of Bitcoin. And I think that raised a lot of questions and concerns for a lot of people in terms of the Sharia compliance, should we do with it or not? I think from my perspective and the way I look at it, I've always been that, you know, this is a new reality. It's a technological paradigm shift. It's here to stay. And some market worth over $300 billion at the moment and north of. Obviously that figure fluctuates, but it is here to stay. I think there's, again, we briefly talked about it before in our chat. I think there's a lot of noise pollution. There's a lot of scams that have happened, which I think have tainted the whole ICO cryptocurrency market. I've never really looked at it in terms of it being a currency. I've always thought about it as a alternative payment mechanism, and I think this was originally the way it was intended for. I think from a jurisdictional perspective, and I like the approach. I'm not saying this because I'm here in Bahrain or represent Bahrain, but I like the approach of saying, you know what, let us better understand what is actually going on instead of outright banning exchanges, saying no cryptocurrency. And I think the way I look at it is get the regulations in place, start at an exchange level. I think a lot of people are thinking about coins, how to invest, etc. Because at the end of the day, I think once you get that exchange mechanism going on, you've got that regulatory framework, which one ensures KYC, AML, then start looking at initial coin offerings. Now there are over 1,500 initial coin offerings. I've known quite a few entrepreneurs that have managed to raise tens of millions of dollars, and personally, I wouldn't invest a single dinar in their initiative. So I think
and those coin offerings,
yes,
most of the time they rely just on the white paper,
correct,
which is issued often by anonymous issuers, where you cannot have a proper business plan to ascertain whether the idea is a genuine.
Yes.
In fact, the research found that 82% of all the ICOs were blatantly just the scams. So that's obviously raised the question of, just like in the other financial law of the country, which regulates how you issue security, what you disclose, the prospectus. So that is obviously necessary. But how do you do that for the ecosystem that's supposed to be outside of the system?
Yeah, I think you can. It's a bit difficult because there are some jurisdictions, like let's say like Belarus, that have said, you know what, we're going to open up completely. You can come up. Obviously, they see it as a way of attracting money, but then it's like the wild west. I think if, from our perspective, and the way I would do it is, if you're already understanding how to regulate the exchanges, let the exchanges then start regulating the ICOs. And
because you have another problem there. That's initial thought, let's regulate exchange, and as was mentioned, when it's converts to fiat.
Correct.
But the problem we have around that is that they push the one crypto, like Bitcoin, into another crypto, which is not traced, and then they move it around and they clean it, launder it, and bring it on the other end as a clean. So it's something that is still catching up. There is a lot of things. But one comment I just want to make and get all of your takes, three of you, before I pass it to the audience. And I think we need to pray. I'm not sure, as a traveler, we probably prayed already. But there is one issue that I found bothering me a little bit in the cryptocurrency world. And I want to see your take on this. It's something that I don't hear much discussion about. And this is the problem. Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, as you know, the BIS is the central bank for the central banks. So it's a main central bank of the world. They issued their own report on cryptocurrency just a couple of months ago. And they found two basic fundamental problems where, in their opinion, it goes against the economics of money. So one particular problem is that there is no finality of the payment in Bitcoin. So what they mean by that is that when I transfer the money into your account, and once it hits your account, your money is 100% in your possession. In Bitcoin, because you work on the consensus of a decentralized network and the miners, that is never final. Okay? So you don't finalize it. So once you put a transaction and process and verify it, it's put in a blockchain. Okay? It doesn't mean it's final. It just means it's a blockchain. Every additional block that is added increases certainty, but it never removes uncertainty. In fact, you can have the end of the blockchain start splitting, okay? And if there is no consensus, either one transaction will take over or both, and you have a splitting of the coin, which happened many times so far. Even you have Bitcoin Cash, you have Bitcoin Gold, you have Bitcoin Private, you have Bitcoin 2, Bitcoin Alpha. So many Bitcoins, this already happened. And then what is happening is that if it doesn't come to the split, then the transaction is reversed, okay? So the shorter chain on the blockchain, those transactions are then reversed and cancelled. That's not to mention that you have other selfish mining attacks where the colluding miners can do and reverse blockchain already, as shown by Cornell University studies. But here is the problem for central bank, BIS, is that in a payment structure where you don't have finality of the payment, in the complex world that we operate, they reckon that Bitcoin, because of that particular reason, can never be accepted as a payment system. What are your thoughts? Would that influence how we think and view this technology?
Look, I think I somewhat look at it in a way like I buy shares of a company. I look at it the way that I look at it in a way like I buy shares of company. And again, It is a price, whatever price you're willing to pay for it, which is the market mechanism, then a transaction or an exchange happens. I've, in all honesty, I've traded crypto for years. Never bothered me that they didn't have any finality because I've managed to, in the end, get that value that I entered it in for. And it's the same thing whenever I think about currencies in general, the money in accounts. It's actually, in a lot of cases, the money itself is digital. It's not even hard. It probably doesn't exist. Even when money flows in the international system, it's not actually hard money. So that thought to me didn't really bother me. I look at it in a way that maybe cryptocurrencies and the underlying technology that they have, and it's still, people still do not fully understand the technology. And I think the thinking around regulations and whether it's permissible or not is continuously evolving. But the way, if I was to look at it 5-10 years ahead, I think it could help a lot of people that don't have any means of any payments to actually be able to transact much more meaningfully than hard cash. But this is me just thinking about. But personally, finality has never really bothered me per se.
So this finality thing, I was because I read that paper, and I think to some level it's more of a theoretical argument, because they're saying that if one payment relies on another payment, and theoretically, if all of the miners are more than 50%, they get together and they collude to reverse something, it's possible. Anything is possible, but I think if you get too hung up on that, then you'll never be able to move forward. I mean, even when I mentioned kind of jokingly the definition of mutawatir, in our Islamic tradition, which we consider yufid al-ilm, right? That it means that it gives certainty. They say a huge group to a huge group to a huge group. Everybody narrates in such a way that it's almost impossible that they have gathered to lie, right? So we have that in our tradition, and that's for mutawatir, and we have even lower standards than that. So in the paper they do mention this finality, but I think it's my opinion. If we have a technologist here, maybe they can give some feedback, but I think it's being blown up bigger than it actually is. Maybe for some small unknown currency, crypto, that would be an issue, but for something as big as Bitcoin, where you have so much transparency, yes, there could be a fork, but the other one will still remain. And one thing that I've noticed in the some of the exchanges now, because this was mentioned, they're setting up best practices. Like the biggest exchange is called Coinbase. So they're setting up best practices. Who will they allow to list on their exchange? And you always want your coin to be listed on the exchange, because that's like, the NASDAQ, right? You want to be listed on the NASDAQ so everyone can buy your shares, So they have different criteria, and those criteria really represent the best practice. Your white paper, your team. Is this a result of a fork, or is this a native, thing? There is a lot of conditions that they put, but they're very good conditions that seek to have a high quality. So I think it's more of a theoretical thing than it is something that's going to stop.
I supposed to read my paper on, but I really try to give time for question and answers. But your question again bring in my paper what I said, that this is a necessity that we have to involve states. In opposite of the principle that Sheikh Ashraf mentioned, we have a principle also saying Dar'ul Mafasid Muqaddamun ala Jalb al-Masalih, even if the Masalih is more. In my paper, I explained that this evil, if it is small, if you leave it because of the human nature, usually human nature with the assistance of shaitan, even if the mafasid is small, it overweights the masalih, which is what we are seeing in the cryptocurrency. Because of this cryptocurrency, it has to be, in order to be allowed as a currency, it has to have some kind of state management. This is one thing. The second thing is that In all our scholars, they put emphasis. We have to know that we have formal and informal regulators. If you look at the fiqh literature, always the fuqaha are saying, if a new issue emerged, innovation emerged, the society should not stop asking the scholars. They have to go to the scholars and ask them, what is the rule of this emerging issue? The reason is, it's not because of that, because scholars are regulators. Regulators, and the kings used to consult them before they issue anything. That is because they have to take their view, because they are the people who are helping regulators. This Dar'ul Mafasid Muqaddamun ala Jalb al-Masalih is the one that the regulators will take in this case, because so far cryptocurrency is not a worldwide practice. Even if it's in one country, it's not a practice of that whole country. So that to say that is an acceptable currency for that. Of course, I will argue that the issue is not, I don't think the scholars are going for prohibition and non-prohibition. No, I don't see there is any. The scholars are talking about, if it is not a currency, I don't have to give a view on it. It's not a currency. I don't say haram or halal. It's not a currency. Why should I say haram? Why should I say it's prohibited? Why should I say it's allowed? So those who are saying it's not a currency, they are saying, ya Jama'ah, this is not a currency. It's like some people come together and they create something and they say winds in the air are currencies. So because they come together and they create this, they say wind is a currency, then we consider it is a currency. That is not the case. We have to see whether we have certain principles that we apply to make it whether it's a currency. When we remove the issue of currency, we didn't say cryptocurrency is not. Maybe we can say, okay, it's not a currency, it's something else. We have to find out. Maybe it's an asset, maybe it's a ball, maybe it's a chair, but it's not a currency because of our principles. We have a principles, and these principles, for us as Sharia scholars, this is how we are trained. We have the principle that we are trained on from our beginning up to the end. That principles are almost like a generic principles. When you try to go around these principles, you create a lot of chaos in the society, you create instability, you create injustice, you even violate the maqasid al-sharia of wealth protection. This is the issue that we have to talk about. We have to see whether this cryptocurrency is talking about wealth creation or wealth elimination.
And
this is the issue.
And on that note, first of all, how much time do we have for the Q&A now? For Salah and everything? What time is it? I don't know. It's very hard. I'm from Australia, so it's land of kangaroos, so we have different time there. So we have some time, I think. Can we get somebody to pass a microphone and we can maybe open it to your question, your comments or thoughts or anything that you have on your mind? We can continue. It's very, when we have the robust discussion, I think we all benefit because you clarify your own thoughts and so on. So who would like to get us? Okay, we have a gentleman at the back. If we could get somebody to give him a microphone at the back there. And I'm sure somebody will be on that side next question, so make you walk more. There is a gentleman over at the back. I should have prepared some jokes between the walking time, so I entertain you, but I didn't. I have one good joke if we have time about the cryptocurrency. Anyway.
Assalamu alaikum. Ali al-Hashmi, lawyer from Dubai. Looking at the cryptocurrency and the whole debate about whether it is considered a currency or not, considered currency or not, is a debate that may happen here, let's say in Bahrain, GCC, wherever the scholars are looking into this. But that doesn't happen in other places where there is no Sharia-related compliance. What happens, and it would happen, and I think it's happening, that in other places, cryptocurrency is considered a currency and is adopted. And I think it's a matter of time that that currency will be in use across countries, across the countries that are using them, and to our countries here that are not looking at them at the time being. So what happens then if this is not being looked at or accepted? That's number one. Number two, and I don't know if anyone of the panelists is central bank banker, but if there is anyone in the central bank as well, it would be helpful for their answer. Central bank has an important role in the monetary policy. Now, cryptocurrency is not something that the central banks can monitor or use. Therefore, how the central banks are going to control the effect of cryptocurrency? Again, this question is for central bank people. So if anyone from the panelists is not from the central bank, I would want to hear from anyone who's in the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yep.
Barakallahu fikum. This issue of the central bank, so I discussed the paper by the Federal Reserve, St. Louis, and they, number one, they did not say we recommend that the United States ban all crypto because we are not able to affect monetary policy. They did not say that, because it also goes to the freedom of people to what extent should you impede on people's freedom? That's another big issue. Cryptocurrency, it's really about freedom, and freedom to choose, and to what extent should that be stopped? So, but what they said, and also other, I think BIS also said the same thing, Basil, but they're talking about that make an alternative. Don't just try to say we're going to ban it because we can't control it. No, make your central bank currency more competitive, because in all of my research, nobody thinks that they can affect central bank policies through crypto, because the thing is that crypto works differently, right? It's not part of the fiat fractional reserve system, right? You don't deposit crypto in a bank and get interest on it, right? You don't do repos with the central bank with crypto. So it functions differently. It functions like gold. How does the central bank manage gold? If people are buying gold and they're keeping it at home, how can they affect monetary policy through the gold? So they can't. Same thing with cash. If people have cash and the central bank wants to increase interest rates, decrease interest rates, change the reserve requirement, somebody has cash under his pillow, you're not going to be able to do anything unless you can convince him to sell his cash and put it in a fixed deposit. So I think that's what I have found in regard to that particular question. Barakallahu fikum.
First question.
What the first question is talking about some places the cryptocurrency is used, and in that case, if the state or the government allow it, this is what we are saying. It gets one of the characteristics of currency. Now remaining the others that I have mentioned already. One of the important of the characteristics that I mentioned is that a currency should be able to purchase another currency. We have to answer this question before we can arrive at whether it's a currency or not. If I want a cryptocurrency, I should be able to use my dollar to buy a cryptocurrency in order to make it a currency. If I cannot, it's not a currency.
Okay.
Not mining.
Thank you. Another question.
Sorry, the second one is so talking about central bank policy. This is what I was talking about. The central bank should be able to have effect and make some kind of regulatory protection for the society. We are looking at the society as a whole. The society is like, let's say it's 10 billion, but the people who are using cryptocurrency, maybe they are few. Why should we leave this big number of people without protection, and we are just protecting the few people who are just using cryptocurrency? This is what I'm saying.
Okay, can we get a mic to the next? And while the mic is getting there, I'm just going to give you two statistics to the brother that asked. Number one, use of the crypto is now at the all-time low. It's decreasing in the West. So now it's the least it's ever been used. It's because it's expensive and so on. At the peak, it was $60 just to purchase a cup of coffee. The second thing in terms of the traceability, just while we're getting is blockchain is open ledger. So Sydney University of Technology professor did actually the study of the whole blockchain and determined, and we know who in which account and digital wallets holds how much money. So we found, for example, that wealth concentration in Bitcoin is higher than North Korea. You know, it's the highest form of wealth concentration in very few wallets. So there are some of the statistics maybe that might add to that discussion. Next question. Did you find the next?
Nidal Ghatis from Bahrain Polytechnic. Dr. Arbona, his paper based on we need to establish if the cryptocurrencies is a coin or not. So if it is not a coin, it means that it's not acceptable from Sharia. This is my understanding. And he mentioned a few criteria. I wish I have the time to discuss all of these criteria. The first criteria is about the state control. The core idea about cryptocurrencies, about decentralization compared to centralization by central banks. So if the whole, as Amir mentioned, it's a noble idea, and to free people from the control of the corporations and certain families who are controlling the central banks, especially the Federal Reserve, controlled by certain families. So Satoshi trying to free people and to establish alternative payment mechanism. So where is the problem if we agree that we want to use certain thing as a currency? In the old days, we used to use gold and silver, and sometimes use other things for as a coin or currencies. So the whole idea of state control is against the cryptocurrencies. Another thing about the non-acceptability. If we know that it's just started 10 years ago, and now the market cap for cryptocurrencies in December last year, it was around 800 billion, and now it's around 250 or 300 billion. So it means that it's increasing, but because of the volatility, which is Dr. Arbona talked about stability and volatility, yes, the volatility, it came part of it because the established institutions are not in support of this whole idea, and they challenge it and keep spreading rumors that it's used in the dark web and it's used for money laundering. But the reality, even our currencies can be used in for criminal activities. So this is not an issue of stability. It will happen when the people started using it and it become the trend. Cryptocurrencies is the next big thing. We accept it or reject it. We are talking about halal and haram and these kind of issues. This reminds me when we Muslims start talking about satellite, is it acceptable or halal and haram? This will put us behind. The forgery, it can be duplicated or can be changed. If we know the technology, the blockchain technology behind the technology behind the blockchain, they say the code is the law. And the smartest people in the world developing these codes and it become acceptable, and no one can change this code and shouldn't be changed. So there are many things that got mentioned in Dr. Arbuna's papers.
Let us maybe
requires a
deal
lot
with
of
these
discussion.
particular questions.
I will leave
so
it
that I think these are the key questions. Dr. Arbuna, would you like to?
Okay. The first question about the idea of making cryptocurrency not regulatable. You have to differentiate between idea and principle. Idea and law. Your idea might be there, but law might not allow you to do that. So here I'm talking about principle. He has the idea that his intention is not to get it regulated. And we are saying if it is not regulated, it will affect a large number of people in the society. So we are saying it has to be regulated, this idea. This second...
And just one point on that one, when you say, I think what we are talking about here is the value or intrinsic properties which you discuss is something that cannot be changed unilaterally by someone. It is independent somehow, like a gold, for example. So that's why, in that sense, the general idea of that blockchain and decentralized and so on, where it is independent from anyone to manipulate it. But what you were saying now is, and I think that's 100% spot on, is that we have now a situation where things can be manipulated. Like in this particular case, we say it's decentralized. However, we now know that 3 or 4 mining pool control 70–80% of the hash power in the Bitcoin economy. So what that means is that you have 3–4 entities controlling 70–80%. I'll give you one example. One of the largest one is a company called Bitmain. Bitmain produced the mining equipment, and they control the largest 30–40% that we know of. Now, Bitmain is registered in the Cayman Islands. You don't know even who is behind it. So you have a couple of entities. If they collude, they can do a lot of things, And the thing is, no matter how little possibility there is, the idea is that does it build? So we have a proof of stake. The point is, Bitcoin is now built on proof of work. Proof of stake will have its own issues, but the idea which we cannot now change them. Yeah. So just wanted to clarify that point.
The idea is same idea, same argument will come. The idea is this is a central banks are controlling currencies. We have to get a way that central banks will not control, and at the same time, the people who are controlling Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies are small people, are same as central banks.
They are new Bitcoin central banks.
They are new Bitcoin central bank. So same issue will come in. And the issue of non-acceptance, we are talking about general acceptance of the society, not a group of people. It has to be, for example, a child can take a dinar. Everybody works, he can get a dinar. But in the case of cryptocurrency, in order for me to get a cryptocurrency, I have to be knowledgeable, I have to have computer science, I have to be able to work on computer, I have to be able to know numbers, I have to know numbers. A person who is not educated, he doesn't know even 2 plus 5 is how much, he cannot have access to. So the issue is, again, let me clarify, and I have clarified it again. I'm not talking about whether it's halal or haram. I said it from the beginning. I have to establish, when I said it's not a currency, it doesn't mean that I'm saying it's haram. It's not a currency. I have to find out whether it's something else. But if I say it's not a currency, you cannot use it as a currency, because if you said a currency, I cannot apply the principles of currency on it. As it is, I have principles of currency. If you say a currency, I cannot.
this is why, and Dr. Arbuna has the right to his opinion, and this is why in my presentation I gave all of the different opinions, and each one has very credible scholars behind each set of opinions. So some say, share the same opinion as Dr. Arbuna, that it's not a currency, it doesn't fulfill the conditions. Others say that as long as some people agree that it's a currency for them. So like the first definition that I mentioned, that I started with, amongst those people, it's a currency. And then others have different opinions. So our fiqh is broad, and it can accept different interpretations, and those different interpretations are there. So I mean, yeah.
Somebody could give a microphone to the sheikh, please. And just before that, that's why we're here to find and pick these particular points. It's a not easy yes or no, but there are a lot of shades. Like even what you were mentioning about blockchain, being 100% this and that. It's not true. We have research that show that blockchain transaction can be reversed. And not just that, in a smart contracts and so on, they cannot verify anything. The only trace, there was a case where one of the painter, he painted Mona Lisa, actually copied it, and he put it on the blockchain. It was encrypted and traceable, but it was a fake. So we have to understand specifically the problems of technology. What is it that this technology can do? Because there is a lot of hype about the promise. So to be able to benefit from this technology, and I apologize to Sheikh, just want to finish this, and technology is shaping our world. Look at next door, China. They have now something called TechFin. We have FinTech, they have TechFin, which is technology that was converted to finance. If you have an AliExpress or WeChat, today 1.5 billion people transact. These two apps, which were technology that handle now banking, take 60% of the fee in China. And they have hundreds of millions of users. They started after blockchain, but they explored. So we have to know specifically what works, how it works, so we can benefit. So we have to be very rigorous to see what will stick and what won't stick from this. Sheikh, I apologize.
Thank you. I would like to make a few comments on the issue of crypto assets or cryptocurrencies. I think like most international bodies are now describing them as crypto assets instead of cryptocurrency because they don't fulfill the definition of currencies. But I would like to pose some questions based on the issues that was raised in the panel, and also the question that was raised by the audience. Let me ask this simple question: why a genius person who can solve a logarithm should be given money, or his ability to resolve algorithm should be converted to something that has a value? The answer, when we look at, for example, Bitcoin, the most famous crypto assets, is that there is a demand for this, for the fact that he was able to solve this algorithm. Why there's a demand? There's a demand because of speculation. This fact that he has this coin, there are people who are speculating, hoping that they can make money. If I buy it today for 100, in few days it might become 200, 500, 1,000. It's rational to demand to buy something, even if you don't believe has value, if you think that the value will increase in the future. This is one reason, the speculation. I think there was a very nice slide that summarized that our compare cash to deposit to cryptocurrency, crypto assets. Then there is the privacy, because since it's like cash, nobody see when I exchange cash with the individual through the blockchain technology. I can use it for privacy transaction or criminal transaction. It's good for both of them. So this privacy element is what part of the demand. There is illegal transaction that justify the demand. And the last element for the demand, based on that slide and based on analysis, the fact that the convenience. I can do transaction over the net, so I don't have to move from one place to another to conduct such transaction. These are the reason behind the demand for crypto assets internationally. These are the main reasons. But the reality is the first two reasons, the speculation and the illegal transaction, are the main drivers for the demand for crypto assets. The last two, the privacy and the convenience, are not the main reason behind transaction. And this is why many regulators or central bank in their countries prevented financial institutions from dealing with the crypto assets, because they know that the first two objectives are not objectives that serve intermediation, development, the welfare of the society. And this is why, for example, the Central Bank of Jordan, since 2014, early 2014, we told banks and financial institutions under our regulation, you can't use your institution to provide services related to crypto assets. Actually, at that time, it was for Bitcoin, and then we generalized this. Now, the underlying technology has nothing wrong with it. The blockchain technology has nothing wrong with it. The concept of meeting the privacy need or the convenience is something that is noble, and even fiat currency could be tokenized and provide the same features of crypto assets, but without the risk of speculation and without the risk of illegal transaction.
Which already is. I mean, we all have a cards, isn't it? And it's already money is digital.
Well, digital and fiat is a little bit different, because the digital, the account, the e-wallets are digital, but they are not tokenized because they are not central bank money. You still have the credit risk element there, because if you keep them in a bank or in a wallet, you might lose them. The good principle about central bank money, it's there regardless of
That's an enormous feature, being able to manage and control the money, which you don't have in the crypto world. Once your money goes away, you can't do anything about it.
You can issue today a crypto currency based on gold. So if you have this token, this is equivalent to specific gram of gold. Nobody is doing that because they would not benefit from that. But
that's something that is as well in the power of those developers. You know, as you say, you can do that. Many people don't realize that behind this Bitcoin, for example, there is a Bitcoin core that manage the software. So there are developers who actually do that. A few years ago, Bitcoin accidentally produced 90 billion Bitcoins. In 2 blocks, it made 90 billion Bitcoins twice.
Correct.
Mistake happened, you know. So there are these developers, not just miners, but developers who actually control these things. And this is where, I guess, from your perspective, which you're saying that central bank here is the system where we control what's happening versus this system where we are outsourcing something to where we lose a bit of that control.
But it's not just it's a protection of the public, because see, in the countries where it was open for the public to use it, it ends with catastrophe. And just, it's not like a satellite example. It's like those who are from Kuwait who remember al-Munakh market. There were papers that were billions of Kuwaiti dinar that disappear at nothing, because again, the fact that I'm a genius, I can solve an algorithm has no value. And if Bitcoin has a value today, what about the second generation crypto asset? Will turn the first generation worth nothing.
I don't want to say what will happen with the crypto technology when we have a quantum computers, which will be this cryptology of today. But Brother Harry wanted to
I just have a point. Mistakes do happen, and I'll give you an example of a recent, for example, transaction. I've wired manually from a bank my money. 2 weeks later, the bank has no clue, the counterparty has no clue where the money is. So even in the current existing financial sector, there are issues. Now, maybe to look at it, technology will always outstrip regulation, and obviously I think this is, as you mentioned, an alternative, maybe financial method to do, and I think there are always people will jump to conclusions to say it's either purely based on speculation, it's purely based on investments. But I think the moment regulation kicks in, it will give it legitimacy, and I think that will take some time. And obviously you mentioned Jordan, I know, put a ban. From a welfare perspective, though, if I look at Zug Canton in Switzerland, they've managed to pump billions of dollars into the economy there, created a lot of software engineers, a lot of programmers, a lot of these companies, the crypto exchanges. Now, it's not a question of whether some of them are complete scams. I completely agree with you. But if we put the right regulatory framework, it can create thousands of jobs, bring in billions of dollars if done in the right way. And I think we need to look at it also from that perspective. I think it's still too early maybe to, people still are trying to figure out what the technology is, what it's really intended to. And I think human nature, we somewhat now don't want to maybe be obedient to a central party, but decentralized. And I think that's a new reality which regulators and the current existing system is trying to get to grips with. But I think there are still, it's creating a whole new economy and an ecosystem which brings its own benefits, and obviously it has its cons. So it's there, I think we look at it from two sides of things.
I think this is a discussion that can go for very long, so I'll give to the Sheikh.
Just I want to give one number.
Yeah.
So there was a Harvard case study, right? And it was talking about ICOs. And one of the big uses of crypto is actually to invest in ICOs. So I invested in ICOs, Islamic ICO, and you have to buy crypto in order to invest in it. And I guess the beauty of ICO is that you can actually invest in this startup from anywhere in the world, and it takes 5 seconds to invest. You just scan the QR code and you're invested, right? And they were showing a chart, and it's showing the VC investments in blockchain. And they're showing that, you know, for maybe in September 2017, it was maybe less than $2 billion. And the ICO investments, right, are something like almost 2.5 billion. So all of these are new startups that are coming out. Of course, some are good, some are bad, but out of all of these things, maybe the next Google, maybe the next Facebook, and you have all of this risk capital going into starting new companies. So I don't think that I would just chalk that up to, oh, it's all speculation, you know. So I think that's something that is true, that's real, that's happening, you know, for us to consider as well. And I definitely agree that once the regulation happens, especially regulating the exchanges, the illegal stuff will start going away. I mean, that's what you know, FAT, you know, the Financial Task Force is saying. So the illegal thing, hopefully we can get rid of that. And leave it and focus on the more positive things. Speculation is just a reality of what happens when technological revolutions happen. There's always going to be speculation. If you try to kill it, then you may risk killing also the innovation and killing the next Google that could be in your country, and instead it's going to be in like South Korea or something. So.
Look, I don't know. Do you want to? I think we have a lot of hands, and I don't want to keep people. What do you think? The brothers there, we have 4 hands. So look, how about we have one more last question? You fight whoever wins. Yeah. No, the brother behind you, he was very patient. He wanted to ask the question. Our brother from Egypt. By the way, I have a very good joke. Anybody heard, I don't know, on this, that summarize some of these points? If you want to know, come see me later. I tell you, it's very interesting. That summarize the crypto in one simple way.
Assalamu alaikum. Excuse me, can I ask my question in Arabic? Yeah. أنا
But you told me,
سؤالي
just a second, you told me, what, 1 hour ago you want to practice English.
إن شاء
And learn
الله.
English. So here's your opportunity.
إن شاء الله I'll ask my question another conference on English
Okay,
إن شاء الله.
okay.
أنا سؤالي يعني هو بعض التساؤلات اللي كانت بتدور في دماغي. أنا يعني بتعامل مع بعض الشباب اللي بتتاجر في البيتكوين أو بتتعامل بالبيتكوين. فأنا أسألهم يعني الناس اللي أو اللي بيقول بجواز البيتكوين هيقابلوا بس مشكلة في تحديد زكاة العملة أو زكاة العملة بتاعت البيتكوين تحديدا. يعني لو في نهاية مثلا سنة 2017 كان سعر مثلا العملة في حدود 20,000 دولار، وفي نهاية 2018 النهاردة وصل 7 أو 8. طيب الناس اللي أنا أعرفهم أو مخزنين البيتكوين أو ما بيتداولوش يعني ما بيبيعوهاش ومنتظرين على أمل إنها تطلع فوق ال 20,000 دولار، هيطلع الزكاة على إيه؟ طب هل الزكاة هيكون من نفس جنس العملة؟ طبعا ده مش طبيعي، مش هيعرفوا يطلعوه منها. هيجوا يطلعوه بالنقد، هتقابلهم مشكلة فروق الأسعار وتقلبات الأسعار. بعض التساؤلات بقى، هل في عملة في الدنيا نسمع عنها كاقتصاديين أو ناس بتتعامل في العملات تنزل من 20,000 ل 6,000 وتطلع من 6 ل 18 وتنزل من 18 ل 6؟ يعني هل التضارب ده ما بيضرش بصغار المستثمرين؟ لأن أنا برضو أزعم إن أنا شفتهم قدام عينيا يدخل على أمل ارتفاع الأسعار وبعدين ينزل السعر بيه، فتضر بالصغار المستثمرين. يعني خليني أركز أكتر في سؤال الزكاة وأسمع رأي الدكتور أربونة أو إخواننا في هذه المسألة، وجزاكم الله خير.
Okay, this question is more like a question for Brother Ashraf. But my aspect of it, I will add another thing which I remove it from both zakat and earth. Originally they were in my paper, but I removed them in speculation, because I know speculation, they will say speculation is also in the other currencies. So I remove it because they will argue in that way.
Okay, as you like.
So again, the issue I have to add is also inheritance. If I'm owning a Bitcoin, I'm owning a cryptocurrency, because it's peer-to-peer, nobody can have access to it. I think once, inshallah, long life, once I died, halas, it's gone. My family cannot get it. So this is a question that I think Dr. Ashraf may like to add something on it.
Allahu A'lam. And so I don't really have an answer to that, because that would be something I need to hear from the ulama, and I didn't hear it, so I'm not going to make ijtihad up here in AAOIFI stage. Can we have that? Fadal.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. محمد آل عبد الرحيم من معهد الاقتصاد الإسلامي جامعة الملك عبد العزيز. Muhammad Al Abdurrahim from Islamic Economics Institute in King Abdulaziz University. Well, actually, Sheikh Maher, I think I missed him. In January 10th, 2018, the institution established 1 gram cryptocurrency. This is the first cryptocurrency that is backed by gold. And they took the initiative to give it to the authority in Saudi Arabia when they asked if we can use a cryptocurrency between Saudi Arabia and Emirates. So they started this currency. So it will be managed by the central banks. You could even cash your grams of gold. So it will be fully Sharia compliant. This is the first step that this proposal has been tested with some Malaysian scholars and other scholars that in the Islamic Economics Institute. But I think we should move or think forward that we have to make this cryptocurrency as much as we can, because we have a lot of assets. I know it's intellectual, as you said, Dr. Anubano, it's an intellectual asset, intellectual mathematics. Why? We have assets there, so we can back it by oil, back it by silver, by gold, but etc. And we can evaluate on spot, because the price of the gold is out there, the price of silver out there, all commodities. So I think if we want to think forward, we can solve the issue of zakah of this brother. We can solve it because we can know how much it's going to cost. And I think I will maybe communicate or contact the respectful people here in this, because we can maybe move forward with this product to the private sector. The red tape in the government will take a lot of time to see it. But I think the thinking forward, like Sukuk. So now Sukuk, most of the Sukuk people want assets-backed Sukuk and so on. Last thing is, if I think of why people are accepting cryptocurrency, because we eliminate the fees from banks' fees actually. so I can send the money on spot to the other guy in China or whatever place on spot, right, in a couple seconds, without making me pay for the transaction fees. So this is real situations, and if you because there is an unlimited cases or scenarios that we could create today, tomorrow, and after tomorrow. But let's go to the how we make it a real real product that people can use safely. They could, and this is the more important thing here. Now we are investing in the financial economy. But if this currency does not have a positive impact in the real economy, buying and selling, so it's another crisis. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I do agree with you that this is what I'm saying. It's an asset. Whether you pledge it to another asset and you call it cryptocurrency pledge to another asset, it's not a problem. But the issuance of the issuers or the creators of cryptocurrency, they want to disassociate it from any underlying asset. So in that aspect, I said, okay, it's not a currency, but we can look at saying that this is an intellectual asset. Intellectually, because of my intellect, because of the usage of the blockchain, all these services that I put in here create some kind of asset, like I'm selling and buying, like people sell numbers of cars. You buy number of cars, 100 million of dollars, but it's just a number. But it's an asset because of the prestige which is associated with it.
If I can just make a comment, what you're describing is not a cryptocurrency, it's more of a token. It's an asset-backed token. And the thing is about that is, number one, people are still going to face the volatility they're basically buying a little piece of gold, digital gold. So they're going to also face the volatility of gold. The gold goes up, gold goes down. It's volatile as well. If there's a war somewhere, the gold shoots up, and now the thing that they're buying is more expensive. So it becomes an investment in gold. So it's not, is that going to be the same as a regular currency? Also, a central bank will not be able to affect monetary policy through that because it's just like a piece of gold. So it's like a gold fund that can be traded electronically. So the other thing is that you face the issue of trust. I have to trust whoever is managing it. I have to trust that they maintain the amount of gold, that they insure it, blah, blah, blah. I think the fact that in this case you said that working with the central bank, of course, you solve that issue. If the central bank is going to manage the gold reserves that are going to back this asset, then at least people can trust that. But you still have, like I said, the issue of the volatility is going to be there. No escaping it. The other issue of the volatility, and I forgot the other one, but it's going to be treated like a gold fund. So, and Allah knows best.
Thank you very much. That's the end. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. May Allah reward you all the best. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. This, alhamdulillah, concludes the day one of the conference. And I'm very much thankful and grateful to all of you for participating in it. Inshallah, tomorrow we will see each other again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.